So if you imagine I'm Michael Phelps or Kate Campbell, Ian Thorpe or Louise Savage, those wonderful athletes, or any professional athlete for that matter. Imagine if I turned up to training each day and didn't have a stopwatch. I wouldn't be measuring my time. I think I was doing well. I wasn't be sure, but without a stopwatch, you just can't actually measure it.
Hi, I'm Jane Hilston, marketing consultant and founder of Dragonfly Marketing and author of How to Do Marketing, a comprehensive guide for small businesses. Welcome to this episode of the How to Do Marketing show. Now, I'm a really curious person. I love to ask questions, and one of my favourite things about being a marketer is trying to figure out and understand why people do the things they do. How do they make decisions? Who influences their decisions? Why do they choose one product over another? Also, as businesses, without our customers, we actually don't have a business. So it makes sense that we need to understand if we are serving our customers well. We need to know if we are delivering an experience that has them singing up praises from the rooftop, or if perhaps they believe we have a bit of room for improvement. I would even go as far to say that the level of customer satisfaction or dissatisfaction with our business is one of our key performance measurement metrics. But customer research is more than just understanding how satisfied they are. By getting to know our customer, we can really understand where their pain points and their desires are, and how as a business we are able to position ourselves as a solution to those challenges and aspirations. Customer research can also be used to help decide where to invest our marketing dollar. Where can we reach our customers? Which social media channels are they on? Which radio stations do they listen to, etc.? Conducting customer research is such an important thing to do. So I've called in the big guns to chat about this. My guest on the show today is Rob MacDougall. He is the CEO for a company called TLF Research for the Asia Pacific region. So TLF Research is a global specialist in customer satisfaction and loyalty research. Globally, they conduct over 500 satisfaction research studies each year in all business and public sectors. So Rob has been involved in the research field for over 20 years. His passion is about understanding the voice of the customer, and he is the co-author of the book, How to Measure Customer Satisfaction. In the spirit of curiosity, I had so many questions for Rob. So let's hear what he has to say. Rob, why is it so important for businesses to research their customers?
That's pretty easily answered, actually. And if I give you an easy perspective initially, and then I'll go into why big businesses do it and why maybe some smaller businesses don't. So if you imagine I'm Michael Phelps or Kate Campbell, Ian Thorpe or Louise Savage, those wonderful athletes, or any professional athlete for that matter. Imagine if I turned up to training each day and didn't have a stopwatch. I wouldn't be measuring my time. I think I was doing well. I wasn't be sure, but without a stopwatch, you just can't actually measure it. So that's the simple sort of analogy. I mean, businesses typically, since the 80s particularly, big business have recognized just how important it is, customer satisfaction and customer loyalty towards future profitability and future business growth. So that's basically why big business do it. And you've got things like a customer satisfaction index. You've got a net promoter score. They can benchmark against other organizations as well. We do it in the UK for the Customer Service Institute over there. We survey probably about 400 or 500 organizations, and they all compare each year their performance. And yeah, so there's NPS, Net Promoter Score, which has been a big one in the last probably, I'd say now 14 years, close on.
Can you just explain for anyone that hasn't heard of the NPS,
Sure.
Can you just explain what the Net Promoter Score is all about?
Well, look, basically it's the difference between the detractors and your apostles, basically, those people who are going to promote your business.
Yeah.
And it's a very simple question. It's just how likely or unlikely would you be to recommend XYZ organisation to your friends or family, and it's using what they call it's either a 10-point scale or 11-point scale. It's either 0 to 10 or 1 to 10, but typically 0 to 10 is what they profess. And you take the percentage of people who give you 9 and 10 away from the percentage of people who give you 6 or less.
Which are the detractors. So the six
Yeah,
or
the
less are the
detractors. Yeah.
detractors.
If promoters are called 9s and 10s.
Yeah.
We don't use 7s and 8s because we sort of say they're in that ambivalent position. They're not promoters. We know
Yeah.
9s and 10s definitely are. Some might be in the 8s, but
Yeah.
most are your 9s and your 10s. And so we take that away and you get a percentage, and you might end up with 30%. You could end up with 0%.
Yeah.
There's a lot of organisations in Australia that actually struggle to get above 0. So if you go back in 2006, Mark Ritson wrote a really interesting paper where he had 2,000 people interviewed throughout Australia. So it goes back that far, and Mark.
So 2 questions. So before you said some of the reasons why big businesses might ask their customers how they're doing and measure customer satisfaction is because, as you made the analogy, you've got to measure to see how your business is performing. And what better measure to see how your business is performing is those people that you seek to serve. But you mentioned something about and why small businesses may not. Why do you think some small businesses don't measure this?
Look, there's a whole range of different reasons that they probably don't. Some just don't have the resources to be able to do it. Some don't know how to do it. Right? Yeah. They don't know where to start, so they sit back and say, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing here, or I can't afford it. They perceive it's very expensive, when in fact there's really, really cheap options out there at the moment. Some are even free to be able to do it. And then they don't know what to do when they actually get the results. So it's about the objectives, right? The capacity, and then the ability to actually use the information.
And I guess for some small businesses, I think there's a couple, in my experience, I think there's a couple of things that might hold them back. Sometimes it's quite confronting going out and asking your customers how you're doing, because as you said, if you can live in the little bubble of, I think I'm doing quite well, and there's a threat that bubble may be burst when you receive negative feedback, that's going to stop a small business owner from going out and making that and prioritizing that customer service. But I also think it might just be a little bit of overwhelm. Like, you might hear, as a small business, you might hear the words Net Promoter Score and, international benchmarking and customer service indexing. But in actual fact, it can be quite simple, can't it, to actually go out and ask your customers for feedback?
There's so many different ways you can do it. I mean, you can do web surveys, telephone surveys. Telephone surveys and face-to-face interviews are by far the most expensive, but they get you the best data. That's the thing about that. And that's why we do them. We get anything from 50 to 70% response rates for a telephone interview. And that's typically what you want to be aiming for. Whereas with self-completion questionnaires, whether it be a paper survey or a web survey, right, you can get down as low as 2 or 3% response rates. And that's when you've got to go out to a lot of people. It usually comes back to the level of attachment the customer has with your business.
Yes.
So for a club or something like that, where they have a lot of attachment, right, then your response rates can get up to 15%, which is what we get for Doolies, for example, Doolies in Sydney. That we're getting 15% response rate from members for that. So we're getting thousands of respondents.
Do you incentivize it?
Well, they go into an incentive in terms of they can win, some money, basically. Yeah. So there's 5 lots of prizes of, I think it's $500 or $200 or something like that. But we do tend to do that. You see them coming out. You can go to win, right? But not where everybody. It's not like a panel where you've got those survey panels where people, they get paid to do a survey, right? And they're just a huge panel.
Yes.
So, but this is your own customers. And if you've got a database, then it's easy to do. If you don't have a database, it's much, much harder to do. And it's basically trying to get people like your takeaway food stores or some of your restaurants. You can encourage them to do it by, getting them to log in to the survey, and that they could win whatever, coffee for a week or some small prize. Some people even use donations to charity for every survey that's completed.
Yeah. And look, when we've worked with small businesses, we've kind of used all of the above, donations to charity or go in the prize to, complete the survey for a chance to win X. Personally, I find that we get a better response if we incentivize.
Oh, yeah.
But as you said, I think if the brand itself has a good relationship with its customers, then generally response rates are fairly favourable as well.
Yeah, because it's about how important matter is to them. And it's also after the survey, if it's been going for a while, if you communicate back to customers with what they've told you, a summary of that, what you've already done to improve and what you plan to do over the future, then they'll participate even more. You'll get a higher response rate than if you don't do that.
Yeah,
if you don't communicate, they sit back and say, why did I waste my time?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think too, just that demonstration of, we asked the question and we've listened, and here's the things that we've implemented as a result, or here's the people who won the prize, or whatever the case.
Yeah. However you can communicate back, engagement's really, really important. That's to ensure that the future surveys are completed and people participate. But it's just about. It's very good for customers as well to see it, because they sit back and go, oh, you think I'm important?
Yes, 100%. Yes.
Yeah, so that's the situation. You want my feedback to help you improve, because I'm going to get the benefit out of this, rather than the other way around. I mean, the business sits back and is definitely going to get benefit out of it, but so should the customer.
Oh, 100%.
Their whole customer experience should be able to be improved. So that's the situation.
You want a win-win. Yep. So we've spoken about, surveys being sent, whether that via online tools such as SurveyMonkey, or even if it's a paper-based survey that someone actually issues to each customer that comes in the door or sends out in the post or whatever.
Yeah.
You've talked about telephone interviews. Just what are all the different kinds of customer research that particularly small businesses could tap into?
Look, if I go back to way back to 1985, showing my age now, Tom Peters actually brought out a training video called In Search of Excellence. And one of the things that was in that was a supermarket chain, or just one supermarket store. And they were the ones that really got me interested in this whole subject in the first place, was that they got customers in and did some focus groups about the layout of the store, what products they wanted, how much of this different product, how they're competitive in price, all those sorts of things. So they getting customer feedback to enable them to do all sorts of things. If you're thinking about a new product, for example, that you want to add to your business, maybe not on the shelves of a supermarket in that sense, but if you're looking at developing some new product, maybe a solicitor or accountant or a real estate agent, that sort of thing, then you can actually test it beforehand with the customers to get an understanding of what it is they're really looking for and how likely you're going to get take up. Situation. So you've got brand equity is another one, but that's usually big business. So you can do all sorts of just feedback from customers, whether it by focus groups or whether it by telephone interviews, or even some cases web surveys.
Now, what's a focus group?
Okay, a focus group is usually a group of about 8 to 10 people, no more than 10. Ideally, not many less than 8. You can get down to 6, but look, 8 to 10 people. They last about 90 minutes. Depending on the nature of the group. And basically, it's just where you've got a facilitator who sits there, somebody like myself. I've done hundreds and hundreds over the years. And what you do is you're just getting feedback. It's the people who are there, the participants, and they should be a representative sample of the population or your customer base. And they're just giving their opinions to a whole heap of questions that you want to find out about.
And so if a small business owner turned around and went, oh, yeah, I could do that, 8 to 10, 10 to 12 people within the customer base, I could probably round them up and offer them a beer and have a chat about and get their feedback. Do you recommend that the small business owner actually do that themselves, or do you think it's better if a third party facilitates that to get more kind of unbiased and maybe more transparent feedback?
Facilitating a focus group takes a lot of skill. It really does, because you've got different people in there. Some want to talk all the time and others don't want to talk at all. And so controlling the actual conversation is really important. But look, small business owners could do it as long as they control the conversation. But it's really much better if you do have an external facilitator. And, they vary in price, and there's lots of them around that actually do it. Usually, you might say $800 for a 1.5 hour session. That includes the notes. So you get everything verbatim. all the comments are verbatim because we typically use ex-court report, ex-court typists, stenographers,
Oh,
sorry.
okay. So they transcript it, do
They
they?
transcript the thing word for word, yeah. So you
Yeah,
don't make
right.
any mistakes, because I can tell you when I've tried to transcribe them for an hour and a half seminar,
Oh my
focus
God.
group, it takes me about 3 or 4
Oh, would it
hours.
take me days? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I've actually been transcribing some of these podcast interviews, which go for an hour. It took me at least 3 hours, and that's from actually having the text written,
Yeah.
automatically transcribed, and me just summarising. It's a nightmare. So
There's a very good program actually you can get there called Dragon.
oh right,
You
yeah.
heard that? Yeah.
No, I haven't.
You just do what we're talking now, and once it picks up your voice, it just types it away for you.
Well, rev.com, I use rev.com, which will do that too. But then because this is very conversational, it picks up all the conversation with it. So when I'm trying to transcribe it into a report format or a blog post, for example, you're going to cut out a lot of the crap, basically.
Yeah, that's
and that's what takes the time. But I guess if you're just getting the transcript verbatim, as you said, then there are some tools that you can do, like Dragon or Rev. Great point. Now, what about these phone interviews? And this is something I've done on behalf of clients, and I agree with you, like the nuggets that will come out of a conversation when you're on the phone with someone. Tell me about those. How do you approach those?
Well, look, the length of the survey can vary. For some clients, you get a situation they just want a net promoter score, right? And that's about a 15 to 20-second interview, right?
Yeah.
And you can get a very, very high response rate, a lot of participation. A customer relationship study has more questions, usually probably up to about 20, 30 maybe. And you typically ask importance and satisfaction. So how important is it to you, and how satisfied or dissatisfied are you? And those interviews can last, depending on the level of engagement, so up to 20 minutes. I mean, we do Volvo trucks, for example, and that's a 18-minute interview, right, with truck owners. But they've got a lot of attachment to it because it's a big investment for them. And so they're quite happy to participate and give the feedback. Whereas if you have low level of attachment, I mean, you're going to get them on the phone for less than 5 minutes, basically.
Yes. And you might get a varied response rate. So some people might only give you 5 minutes, and some people might. So when people are actually selecting their customers to interview for that kind of thing, because for online surveys and things, you could send it out to the whole lot.
Yeah, you do a census,
But for those sorts of surveys, so where they're just a little bit more sticky when it's a phone call or a focus group, what you don't want to do is get all your best customers in the room who are just going to blow sunshine up your butt, do you? You want to get a good cross section.
A representative sample, right? You've got to have those who are satisfied, those who are dissatisfied, big customers, smaller customers. The only way we tend to separate it out is usually ethnicity, because some ethnic groups are more uncomfortable with others, and therefore they're less likely to contribute.
Right.
So I'll say what they feel. And age, we separate by age. So we'll probably do, depending on the nature of the product, we might do 18 to 24-year-olds as a separate group. We might do under 50s compared to over 50s. So you're getting different attitudes. You don't want, you just want to see the representative sample of your business, so that when you get the information, it's accurate. And it reflects the business. That's the most important thing. And it should be a random sample as well.
It should be a random sample, and this should be your opportunity to welcome feedback that's not positive. So if your customers are actually brave enough and take the time to actually kind of share with you where they think you could be doing better, don't just not listen to that. Don't just go into this thinking we're just going to take all the good stuff and we'll just ignore all the, the whingers who tell us we could be doing better. This is an opportunity to really work out how you can be better servicing your customers, and the ones that are happy are happy. So, they're your promoters, but
you've got to use this as an opportunity to improve, because you can use all sorts of questioning techniques, such as, what about competitors? Do they go and shop at competitors, or do they go and do business with your competitors or other similar businesses? Like, for example, if you've got a solicitor, an accountant, they're similar type of businesses in the sense that It's a one-on-one scenario usually in that situation, and we all form our perceptions or our expectations as well based on those sorts of experiences. I'm not going to compare the takeaway food store to my accountant.
Yes.
I'm not going
Yes.
to compare. I'm going to compare my telecom to my water to my electricity, and those sorts of things. Whereas
Yeah.
shops, would take some of your big chains in the takeaway food stuff, right? If I go in to buy a hamburger at this particular store, a big chain,
Yeah.
I know what I'm going to get, right? I've got my expectation because it's the same everywhere I go.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm going down to the little corner takeaway store, right, I'm going to order exactly the same product, but my expectation is going to be totally different.
Yes.
Because I know I'm going to get something I'm going to struggle to fit in my mouth, basically.
Yeah. That's
but it's going to be full of juice and all that sort of stuff. So we sort of form those expectations, and it's about making sure that you use the information so you can improve. We're looking for what I call, or what we call PFIs, priorities for improvement. And those are the things that, there should only be about 4 or 5 things. I mean, if you've got more than that, you've got a problem usually. But it's usually 4 or 5 things that you can address. And you look for the quick wins. They're the things that you can do basically straight away. They may not be the most important thing to fix, but they're the thing you can go back to customers with and say, this is what we've already done.
Yes.
And some things may take businesses 2 years to address. Big sort of structural changes.
Okay, so, if there's small businesses listening to this and going, yep, okay, I think this is something that we really need to tackle. Before they start rolling their sleeves up and, working out which customers to invite to a focus group, what are some of those initial planning considerations that they need to think about before they start worrying about how they're going to ask the questions?
Okay, well, you really got to start at the end before you start at the beginning. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So you go right to the very end and you say, what do I want out of this? How's the information going to be reported? Right? What information do I need to get that I can actually use?
Yes.
So that's about starting back there and saying, okay, at the end of it, you don't want to come to it and say, oh, we didn't ask this. Oh, we didn't ask that. If you're measuring customer satisfaction, it should be based on the lens of the customer rather than the lens of the business. And that means customers determine what's important. Yeah, there's going to be some things that are always important. There was a product back in the late 80s or early 90s called ServQual. You might remember that, Joan. It was a product in from the States, and it was the first sort of serious measure of customer satisfaction. Before then, not much had actually been done, but you had to ask the same questions to every single customer, no matter the difference in the business. And that's where Nigel and I got together, and we disagreed with that whole philosophy because different things are important to different customers.
Yeah.
It does vary in some businesses. You may have large customers who have a different requirement to a smaller customer, but with limitations really.
Yeah.
But it's about making sure. Customer satisfaction is about doing best what matters most, and it's about asking the right questions to the right people.
Yes.
And that's how you get the information. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course that's going to be different for every business. I love that. Start with the end in mind. So do you think, I think we've kind of spoken about all the various ways that small businesses can do this, and certainly the online surveying and creating an online survey, and it even sounds like things like the focus group and the telephone interviews can be done by the businesses themselves. So
university students.
Or university students, so they don't necessarily have to get a customer research expert to do this.
No, they can do it themselves, absolutely, as long as they're doing it. The most important thing is to do it. Look, if they get to a stage whereby it becomes too much, and that's usually where you sit back and look at it and say, why use a third party? Because it's not their core competency.
Yes.
Right? And so they say, well, look, I want to make sure that the information I get at the end of it is going to be useful.
Yes.
Right. So the situation is that's where you can get a third party in. I mean, organisations like ours, for example, we're very flexible in that, and some others are also, in the sense that we can teach them how to do it. I mean, I actually run seminars, around the world on how to measure customer satisfaction. So we teach them how to do it. We can do a bit for them, or we can do the whole lot.
You can do the whole lot. And something that you mentioned that big businesses do a lot of was the brand benchmarking.
Yeah, Brand equity or benchmark?
Brand equity. Yeah. So what's that all about?
Brand equity is all about the value of your brand. So it's all the imagery and et cetera surrounding the brand, how customers feel about the brand.
Yeah.
So it's
how do
looking
you
at the
measure?
value.
Yeah. How do you measure that? What do you do in terms of a research perspective for
Well,
that?
you use the same methodologies. Typically, you wouldn't be using online surveys.
Yeah.
You'd be using more telephone interviews or face-to-face interviews, or some cases focus groups.
So you're talking not so much about the operations and the customer satisfaction in terms of operations, but your questioning is more in line with what's your perception of, company X versus, competitor
Yeah,
Y.
all imagery questions such as that. The attractiveness, the range of products, all sorts of different things. Does it make you feel like this? Does it make you feel like that? All those sort of emotional type questions. So it's about understanding the value of the brand.
Right. And then how's the value of a brand measured? Like if you're asking those sorts of questions about what people think about the look and the feel and the the colours that are used, what are the measurement metrics that come out of that?
Well, that's probably something to go into at a much longer time. That's almost a half day sort of thing, really.
Right.
But it's not something small business should be doing anyway. It's not something they're going to get much value out of. They're just going to get confused, I think. More so, the big thing they should be doing is customer satisfaction research.
Yes. Okay. Oh, that sounds interesting, that brand equity research.
Oh, it is. For big business, they love it.
And yeah, because I know, Rob, that you've written a couple of books. Do any of your books explain these concepts further and help give a little bit more?
I've written one book. It's How to Measure Customer Satisfaction.
Gosh, well,
it's very exciting bedtime reading.
Yeah.
So it's actually just called How to Measure Customer Satisfaction. It was published by Gower in the UK in 1998. So.
Oh, right. Okay. Fantastic. Oh, well, another book must surely be in the pipeline, hey?
Well, there's actually, if you go to our global website, we've got all the directors have written books. Right?
Okay.
So, and there's webinars on there as well, latest thinking and etc. So there's a whole range of different books you can use.
Okay, cool. So if people want to deep dive into any of those topics, they can search around it. Sorry, what's your website? I do have more questions, but just while we're on it, what's the website that they go to find that information?
Well, to go to ours, you go to www.tlfresearch.com.au. Okay. But to get the books and to get the webinars and etc., you go to tlfresearch.com.
Okay, great. So if anyone's intrigued, they can head there and look for some more information.
Yeah.
But a question that I get quite a lot from customers or from clients is, how many responses do you need for responses to be statistically valid enough to be able to make conclusions? So probably not so much with the focus group, but with like the surveys and the telephone calls, etc.
Well, actually with focus groups, we find that if you do eight focus groups, that you'll get 90% of the attitudes basically right. Okay, right. Yeah, because you're getting such depth of information. Right. So you've got everybody in there for an hour and a half. So you're getting a heap of qualitative information. It'll typically pull out what are the most important things that you should be looking at. With regard to, in terms of business surveys, it depends on the nature of the business you're in. We like to look at, in customer satisfaction research, of a level of confidence of 95% plus or minus 0.1. Basically what that means is that if I went out and asked 20 groups of 50 people the same questions, 19 of those groups would say the same thing, plus or minus 10%. Right. Okay. So you're getting a high level of reliability, and that's what we need for that. In business to business, 200 is usually a good number, but some businesses don't have that many clients. So you can do a census, which is what we've done for several businesses that are smaller, and we just do a census. And because they're smaller, typically you get 100% response. You might get one person who doesn't participate. Yeah. In consumer markets such as supermarkets and insurance and takeaway food stores, big sort of stuff, you typically 854 is about the number you need to get.
Approximately.
Statistically, statistically to get
Wow,
95% plus or minus 0.1. But, like, for example, in clubs and etc., if they've got, say, 60,000 members or 40,000 members or whatever they've got, 20,000 members, if you've got access to the database that has their information, you can just send it out to the lot.
Yeah.
And you'll get, probably up to 50, with a club, probably 15%, 10 to 15% response, which is fantastic.
So if like say, I mean, some small businesses might only have 854 customers or clients. And so can you work on a percentage of that?
No, it doesn't come out like that.
Right.
It's all statistical because it's based on the standard deviation, and what that is basically the difference of scores. So the range of scores.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you know the bell curve, right? We look at the COVID-19 at the moment, and you can see ours is a perfect bell curve basically now.
Yeah.
Right? It's what we call the bell curves, and so that usually indicates that things are fairly close together. But if you have a very flat bell curve, then what happens? It means very big dispersion of opinion. So you've got high level of dissatisfaction, high level of satisfaction. So that determines the level of statistical reliability. But look, if you only got 800 customers, I mean, you can do 200. It's still going to give it to you. You won't know the actual accuracy until the end of the survey. That's the whole thing, unfortunately.
But you can still draw conclusions.
Absolutely.
Conclusions with your 200 responses that you get,
providing it's representative of the customer base. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You don't want. Usually, what you find is most businesses suffer from the Pareto principle. Yeah.
What's that?
20% of your customers represent 80% of your business.
Oh yes.
Yeah. And 80% of your customers represent 20% of the business.
Yeah.
In those situations, you're probably going to end up with more of your smaller customers.
Yeah.
Now, you want to make sure you're doing a census of your big customers.
Yes.
And get all of them, as many as you possibly can. Then probably your medium customers, and then a sample of your smaller customers.
Yes. Yes.
So we talk in segments like that about 50. If you can get that sort of situation for a smaller company like that, you probably got 50, 50, 50.
Yep. That makes complete sense. Great.
But you don't want the results to be completely skewed towards your smaller customers.
That's exactly right. Yes, that's exactly right. And from a marketing point of view, what are some of the questions that business owners should be asking their customers? I mean, we talked about brand equity, but if we want to keep it fairly simple, what are some of the questions they can include?
Well, at this stage for small business, it's about if they're trying to develop new product, then they can certainly ask customers about that.
Yeah.
About different things they're looking for, those sorts of things, new product ranges, in terms of what they should be stocking, what they want to be selling, what they should be manufacturing, different services that they can offer that other businesses are offering that they may not be aware of. Yeah. But if you're talking about customer satisfaction research, then Net Promoter Score is a big one. The recommendation, how likely or unlikely is it that you would recommend the business? Some consultants out there say that that's the only thing you need to ask. One of the things that we find is that that's great. You're asking that one question and you get the results back and it says, I've got 30% Net Promoter Score.
Yeah.
Well, what do I do now?
Yeah, that's right.
What do I do?
Does it mean?
I've got this score. What do I do?
Yeah, what does it mean? That's right.
Yeah, so the big ones, the most successful companies in the world, typically they're getting between 50 to 80% Net Promoter Score. Yeah. But as I said, there's a lot in Australia that, go back to that study that Mark Ritson did in 2006, where, people like Qantas and et cetera were getting down minus 20. And you had a lot of businesses in the minus situation. Right?
Yeah.
It's a fascinating article that he did back then.
I'll put a link to it in the show notes. So then when you're asking these questions, particularly when you're asking about thoughts or concepts about things that don't exist. So, if we were to introduce this new product, what would you think? Or an open comment, what is it that you think we could do better? Do you think it's what kind of questions? Do you think it's better to ask kind of multiple choice questions and make it easier for them to fill out? Or do you think there's good kind of nuggets and insight of maybe unexpected results if you do open comments or rating scales? What do you suggest people use?
Look, you can use Any of those. We prefer to use, in our research, we prefer to use a 10-point numerical scale. And the reason why we do that is for dispersion. So you get the range. For example, if you're using a 5-point scale, typically what we do as a human is that we ignore 1 and we ignore 5, right? That limits us down to a 3-point scale. Right? So you get lots in the 3 position or the 4 position. Whereas if you use a 10-point scale, what happens is to get me to go from a 7 to an 8 is a lot easier than to get me to go from a 3 to a 4 or a 4 to a 5.
Yes.
In terms of my scale. So giving dispersion, it means that you'll see more improvement. And we've got lots of statistics and studies that we've done to prove that whereby a 5-point scale will probably make you look better than what you actually are.
Interesting. Yeah. And so when you say a 5-point scale, that's like when you say, please rate, the service that we delivered for this, blah, blah, blah. 1 equals just extremely dissatisfied and 5 equals extremely satisfied, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, so you just do a 10-point scale. You just use polar extremes. I mean, you can do a verbal scale, a simple verbal scale, but that's also limiting as well. But, there's nothing wrong with it. It's accepted. There's a number of different scales you can actually use, but we like to use a 10-point scale because it does give us dispersion. We were raised on it as kids as well.
Yes.
You used to get your tests at school out of 10. Diving scores are out of 10. Common conversation is, they talk about 100%.
So it's in the psyche. It's in the.
It's the psyche. Yeah, we can visualize it in the mind and sit back and go, okay, bingo. Like for example, I use the analogy at seminars and etc. that I said, if you saw a person of the opposite sex across the road and you gave them a 7 out of 10, how likely would you be to go and ask them for a date? Versus somebody who is at 8 or a 9 or a 10, that situation. We find in the internet, in our benchmark, and we do over 500 studies a year, right, for different businesses all around the world. So 500 different organizations of customer satisfaction. And the customer satisfaction index, the median is over 80%.
Right.
So it's about 82%. Yeah.
Okay.
And you think about that, it's logical because if you're doing business with somebody, you're not really scoring them 8 out of 10. I'm not sure you're going to be doing business with them too much.
No. Well, that makes complete sense. So that's across industry and across
all industries, government.
Wow, that's
yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, in Australia, the highest customer satisfaction index we've ever had is for a government department.
Which
is quite unusual. Yeah, they're very, very, very happy customers.
Yeah.
Very, very.
Wow, that's amazing. There you go. So many little tidbits here. This is great. Okay, so how often should businesses be doing customer research? Is this something that they should be doing annually? Is there kind of no rhythm that's required? Just do it, or what do you recommend?
Yeah, look, it again depends on the nature of the business. You can do, say, some businesses. Right, you might only do it every 2 years, once every 2 years, because of the nature of the business. It's too hard to change. You can't introduce change. So if I measure it every year and I haven't changed, I'm measuring the same thing. Pointless. But there are others. Most businesses tend to either do it as a tracking study, like your car dealership or your real estate agent or those sorts of people who are doing, different transactions on a regular basis. They do a tracking study. So the thing is, you're just tracking constantly throughout the year, but you never survey a customer more than twice in 6 months. 12 months, sorry. So once every 6 months, only once every 6 months. Otherwise, you get survey fatigue, and basically then they just refuse to do it anymore. But you can also do it, depending on the nature of the business, you can do it, once every 12 months. If you're a manufacturer, maybe a retail, maybe something like a hardware store, right? You've got your big trade customers, tradies and etc. that you're selling to all the time, the builders and tilers and God knows what else. You can do that once every 12 months or once every quarter for that matter. But usually we find that type of business does it, once every 12 months.
Yeah.
Building supplies. Building supply companies tend to do it more so as a tracking study.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? And truck manufacturers, car yards, and those sorts of things. They're tracking studies. Insurance companies do tracking studies.
And look, it's amazing how quickly 1 year goes around too. So you might have intentions to do it often, and then all of a sudden it's 2 years gone by since the last one's been sent. So So once you've you've started with the end in mind, you've come up with your questions, you've got your results. How can businesses then kind of help these results inform their decision making? Like you mentioned before that some businesses get the NPS result and go, okay, now what? So how do they take those results and action them?
Well, one of the things with NPS is you can also ask the open question is, and why do you say that? Or what do we have to do for you to give us a higher level to be more likely to recommend us?
Yes.
And it could be a range of different things. You can then code that into different areas. It could be delivery on time. It could be competitive price. It could be whatever they're talking about. And you work out the percentage of people who have made that comment.
Yeah.
Or they can talk about 4 or 5 things actually in one comment.
Yeah.
The other thing you can do, what we do is where we use a 10-point numerical scale and we're doing telephone interviews or that sort of thing. What we do is we probe any score 6 or less.
And when you say probe, you ask more questions. Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you say that? Yeah, I noticed you gave a score of 5 for this, and would you mind just explaining a little bit more why? Because we think that in our experience, anybody who gives you 6 or less out of 10 has some level of dissatisfaction.
Well, and as you're
not happy with.
And as you said, if they're a current customer of the business still, and they're giving you under 6, then there's not about to be a customer probably.
Yeah, we call them captives. In other words, they basically don't feel they have a choice. Banks used to be in that situation years ago. Right, the situation was the consumer's not happy, but they sit back and go, it's too hard to change.
Oh my gosh, yes, that's so true. Yes. Yeah. Oh wow, there you go.
So it's like the water company, the electricity company, it could be anything. You sit back and say, for example, like Country Energy, if they're still around,
Essential Energy now. Yep.
Yeah, but if you're dissatisfied with them, what are you going to do, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
But you can change energy companies now. You can't change the water company.
Yeah. And I guess, how much friction is there changing? So you might be able to change it. But, like with banks, it's so hard to actually move your mortgage over and change your business banking and all the rest that you get to, there's a point where you're weighing up, well, what's worse?
The other thing is the attractiveness of the competitors too. How attractive is the competitor?
Yeah, exactly.
So they're all the same. So why bother changing?
Yeah, that's so true. Yes. And something that I think a lot of people underestimate is that ambivalence. And you mentioned that before when you were talking about the NPS score of the people who rate the 7 and the 8s and 7 or 8 out of 10. And so some businesses might go away and go, oh, that's all right, 7 or 8 out of 10. It's not 2 or 3. Cool, happy days. But as you said, that's ambivalent. So that's someone who's just like, meh.
Yeah, I mean, take it or leave it, basically.
Yeah. And that just means if someone better comes along, they're gone.
and they're probably likely to be promiscuous anyway, out there shopping with other ones. My older sister is an absolute classic. She claims to be totally loyal to David Jones, yet she also has a Myer card. She has a this card and a that card as well. So yes, but they are my preferred store, but I go to the others as well. So,
they
shop around.
Right. Oh, absolutely. I completely understand that. So what are some of the biggest mistakes? Talk us through some of the mistakes that you see regularly.
Oh, there's an absolute heap. Well, the big one is that they haven't set any objectives. Why are we doing it? What do we want to measure? What outputs do we need at the end of the survey? What level of statistical reliability do we want? Is it a census or a stratified random sample? Sorry.
Yeah.
And just so I don't confuse people with that stratified random sample, that basically means it's the different customers in the correct proportions. So where I was talking.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So you've got it's representative of the business when you get the results back.
Yes.
The other one is whose perspective. Most organisations where I see them make mistakes, they're looking at it from the lens of the business, which is a process-orientated situation, rather than from the lens of the customer.
Yeah.
Right? So they're asking the wrong questions. They're asking what's important to the business, not what's important to the customer.
That's so important.
So asking the right questions, having a balanced rating scale. I've seen this plenty of times where there's a 5-point scale and they've got 3 positives and 2 negatives. I mean, it's just biased. It's like cheating at golf. The only person you're fooling is yourself.
I love it. Yes.
Unbalanced rating scale I talked about. Biased questionnaire. We like to use the words, how satisfied or dissatisfied are you, or how important or unimportant is it to you? Because you're getting that rather than how satisfied are you really?
Yes, you're loading the question. Yeah, yeah.
Unrepresentative sample where, it's the wrong sample. It's just swayed towards the smaller customers than the larger ones.
Yeah.
Low response rate bias. That can be a big one. The problem
Yes.
is with some of these self-completion questionnaires, if you do get, say, 3% response, right, once you look at the actual statistics at the end of the survey, you can see how reliable or unreliable the data is.
Yeah.
But do the views of the 97% who didn't respond reflect the views of the 3% who did?
Yes.
They might. You don't know. But that's the thing. And no comments recorded is another big one, right? Where so you can actually understand customer sentiment and the emotion behind the score, not just the score.
Yes. Okay. So that's like leaving the opportunity for people to ad lib or add a comment as opposed to just rate you or choose a multiple choice answer.
Well, I can tell you with most businesses that we work with, managers absolutely just the first thing they go looking for is the comments. They'll have a quick look at the score, but they go through the comments. That's what they want to see.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's where the insight is.
Yeah, that's where you get all the customer insight. Double questions is another big one. That's where you're asking two things in the one question, such as how friendly and helpful were the staff? Well, the staff might have been really friendly, but not very helpful. That sort of thing. So you say out of 10 and they go, well, for friendliness, I'll give them a 9. For helpfulness, I'll give them a 5, 7.
Yes, so, that's so true. And I think, particularly when you're designing your own survey, it's easy to kind of combine questions like that because you're trying to kind of make, you're trying to reduce the amount of questions and make the survey as quick to kind of complete as possible, but you're skewing the data and you're not actually getting the correct answer to the question.
Correct. Yeah. Well, I mean, you try and interpret it at the end of when you're doing the analysis. You go, "Oh, what are they actually talking about here?
Yeah. Are we helpful or are we friendly?" Yeah.
You don't know. The other one, I mean, we call it simple verbal scales, but people use them all the time. We just say it's just limiting. You don't get dispersion. And the other one, the big one, is lies, and damn statistics. Is manipulating the data to make it look good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've had clients say to me, "Oh, look, what we'll actually do, we're only going to go and ask these people what they think about us." And I said, "Well, why that?" And they say, "Well, because we know the other people don't like us anyway, so we're not going to survey them." And I said, "Well, why don't we not survey the people who do like us as well?" Because
find out why they don't like us.
Yeah, that's what you want to know. Then also they tend to cheat the data, get rid of data, change the data, turn it around to make it look more positive, or even in some cases more negative than what it actually is.
And it's like I was talking about before, I think some businesses just want to hear the good news and, just not pay attention to any of the negative results, which is just, there's no point in actually doing the survey if that's all you're there to do. So in terms of, I mean, that's so many mistakes to avoid, and I think such a great list there. What about if you had to kind of pull out your top 3 tips, what advice would you give to small business owners?
Well, I would say that the big thing is setting the objectives, knowing what the objectives actually are, having a plan so that you know what you're going to get at the end of it in terms of outputs, so that you can actually use the information to make business plans. That's the big thing. The big tips I always say, look, if you're going to do it, make sure it's the lens of the customer.
Yes.
Right, not the lens of the business.
Yes.
So ask the right question, and then the sample size. So ask the right questions to the right people. That's the most important thing.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And then the outputs at the end so that you can actually use the information and don't get to the end and discover that you've got to go back to the start again.
Yes. And then on that, in terms of actually, so obviously we can measure how many people completed the survey and what scores we received within the survey for NPS and, rating scales and all that sort of stuff. So that's tactically we can look at those measurements. But how do you actually measure on a big picture how that customer survey, that customer kind of satisfaction activity is contributing to the overall business's bottom line? Like, how is it actually moving the business forward as a whole?
Well, typically what happens is profitability and revenue tends to lag behind customer satisfaction and loyalty. So you see it. So what will happen is it could take 12 months, it could take 2 years. But you see it like, for example, in the States, they use the ACSI, basically the ACSI, right, was the American Customer Satisfaction Index. Investors use that as a determinant as to what they're going to invest in. So if the business is going up in the ACSI, then you say that future growth is going to be positive.
Wow.
If the business is going down, then you say future growth is likely to be negative. And there's a direct correlation with that. And even in Australia, many of the big organisations, for example, that are publicly listed, they report on customer satisfaction. They have benchmarks. They reward staff on it. So their bonuses and etc. is part of their wage package, is part of their dashboard that they use for the business. So it's a huge measure for it, because it does show future growth. I mean, if you're improving, your revenue is likely to improve. So your profitability, your sales. So that's where it usually happens, but it does tend to lag. So if you're going down, what was a good example I was looking at just the other day? Oh no, I'm going off the subject. But yeah, if you're going down, then the situation is likely to be a little bit quicker in terms of
that revenue and profit decrease.
Dropping off, customers going somewhere else. But if you're going up, it takes a little bit longer. Communication is really important, Jane, because some of these things you have, communication is really important, because we're talking about perception. Yeah, this is customer perception. It may not be reality, but if the customer believes it, it's reality in their mind.
Yes.
So you can have what we call performance gaps and communication gaps. And performance gaps are those things where you actually are not doing well at.
Yeah.
You have got system issues. Maybe it's delivery, it could be quality, it could be competitive price, whatever. And perception gaps are where the customer thinks this, but that's not necessarily the case. And the only way you can address that is through communication.
Yes.
And I've seen it happen big time, particularly with SAP, that financial software and inventory software. Yeah, a lot of organisations struggled when they first implemented that, and everything went haywire, mainly because the systems they had in the first place weren't right. But what happened? We had one organisation who was a logistics company. So they're doing distribution and etc. products, etc. Well, they had a massive problem, and what happened is, customer dissatisfaction was huge while they were going through this stage. Anyway, they got on top of it, they fixed it all, but customer satisfaction didn't improve initially, right? Because the customers still remembered the bad times.
Yes,
it was the halo going back to that, and not the current performance. So what we actually did is we went to the company and we said, look, what you need to do is create a communication campaign to your customers, giving them a report on the accuracy of your delivery, right? So on time, correct invoicing, all that sort of stuff. Just get them a report every month. Yep. And after about 6 months, they said, okay, yep, we believe you.
Re-educate. Yeah.
So just change their perception through communication.
Yeah. And look, as soon as you say the words revenue and profit, and the fact that this customer satisfaction indicator can have that direct correlation to that, and as you said, it might be a lag, but at the end of the day, I mean, I think that's a compelling enough reason for any sized business to seriously incorporate, this kind of activity in their marketing planning.
Absolutely. They should be. I mean, it comes down to that old statement, you fail to plan to fail.
Yes.
And this is a big part of your planning, because this is how you get the feedback. It's not just based on sales.
Yeah.
Because you want to look at the long-term potential. What we typically, most companies try to do is, if they've got a range of products, is that they try and get the customer to spend more on different products.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Not just a particular product. So, whether it could be a service station, it could be a car yard or whatever. That's the idea. Customer satisfaction isn't the only key driver of loyalty. It is a key metric of it. Right?
Yes.
It's not the only one.
Yes.
So loyalty is the big one.
Yes.
Measuring loyalty. There's a number of questions you can ask for loyalty. You can ask NPS, which is the recommendation.
Yeah.
You can ask how easy or difficult would it be to change suppliers.
Yes.
You can also ask, how do we compare to other suppliers, similar suppliers that you use.
Yes.
Right? And then we also ask sometimes, who is the best and what makes them the best.
Yeah.
Who is the best supplier you deal with, and what do they do that makes them the best? And that way it helps you not only just pick up what you're doing wrong, but what others are doing really well that is ringing the bells.
And this is where it pays for the organisation just to take a step back and go, well, what is it that we're actually trying to ascertain? Is it, are we trying to get a gauge of how loyal our customers are? You know, are we trying to get a gauge as to how satisfied they are, or what is it that's important to us that's actually going to help us make some decisions around how we run this business?
That's the big thing. It's the end. Yeah. How are we going to make changes with this information?
Yeah.
What information do we need?
What are we going to do with it? So much insight, Rob. My goodness, I've literally been hanging on the end of this microphone, listening with bated breath to all of your answers. This has been so fantastic. Now, we spoke about your website before, but where can people, if people do want to reach out to you, where can people find you, Rob?
It's probably through the website or LinkedIn. On LinkedIn. But website's probably the best. It's www.tlfresearch.com.au.
Yep.
Or
and your LinkedIn is Rob MacDougall.
Yeah.
Yep. Or TLF Research.
Yeah, tlfresearch.com.au.
Yep.
They can also, if they go to the UK website that I talked about before, they can subscribe to our free quarterly magazine, which is not just our staff who contribute to it, but guest writers and etc. And it's all some fantastic articles in there.
Great.
They can get that from our website as well, just by clicking on it. Or they can, we're based in Manly in Sydney, so if they're ever in the neighbourhood, they can pop in and say g'day. Yeah, or if or they can just ring me on my telephone number if they want. Okay. 0438 411 985. So. Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Rob. Really, really appreciate your time and all of your generous insight that you have shared. I know I've learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners will have as well. Thanks, great. Rob. Glad to help. Thanks, Jane. Well, that was Rob MacDougall from TLF Research, sharing so much of his fantastic insight into how to understand if your customers are satisfied. So we've heard that there are many ways that small businesses can ask their customers questions. So we can do focus groups, we can give them a phone call, and we can ask them questions via online surveys or even paper surveys. And while we spoke mostly about customer satisfaction measurement in this interview and how this is a key measurement for your business performance, there are many questions that you can ask your customers so that you as a business owner are not guessing what they think, or even worse, inferring your opinion on your customers. This is particularly dangerous if you do not represent your target audience. There's definitely lots to think about. So if you are enjoying all of the small business marketing insight that is being shared out on the How to Do Marketing show, please be sure to hit subscribe and leave a rating and review. We've started a How to Do Marketing group on Facebook, and in this group we are discussing all things small business marketing. So this is a safe space to connect with other like-minded business owners, ask questions, run ideas past people, and discuss the topics that arise in the How to Do Marketing show. So head to Facebook, search for the How to Do Marketing group, and just request to join. We'll see you in there. Until next time, happy marketing!
You've been